The night my mother stood up at my cousin's wedding reception and told 47 people that my younger sister was the one who kept this family together, that was the night I decided I was done being invisible. I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I just sat there with a glass of sparkling water in my hand, watching my mother beam at my sister Danielle like she'd invented sunshine, and I did the math in my head. Quietly, the way I always do everything. 43 months. $191,000. And not one person in that room knew. Let me back up. My name is Megan. I'm 31 years old. I'm a senior financial analyst at a mid-size logistics firm in Columbus, Ohio, and I have been, for the better part of 4 years, the reason my family's landscaping business did not collapse into the ground it was supposed to be tending. My sister Danielle is 27. She is beautiful in the effortless way that makes people assume she must also be kind. She has a marketing degree she's never used, a rotating cast of hobbies she picks up and abandons, and according to our mother, a gift for people that I have apparently always lacked. I heard that phrase for the first time when I was 9 years old. I heard it for the last time at that wedding reception in March. Our father started Hartwell Grounds and Landscaping about 20 years ago. It was a solid small business commercial contracts, residential upkeep, a crew of 8 guys my dad had worked with for years. My dad is a good man in the way that some men are good without being strong. He means well. He avoids hard conversations. He lets my mother do most of the talking, and my mother has always talked loudest about Danielle. I went into finance on purpose. I understood numbers before I understood people, and I made peace with that early. By the time I was 26, I was making good money. Not extraordinary money, but steady, disciplined money, because I don't spend carelessly, and I never have. The first time I helped the business, it wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday. My dad called me because the company's line of credit had been frozen after a missed payment. A bookkeeping error, he said, and they needed a bridge to cover payroll for 2 weeks. $11,000. I transferred it that afternoon. He said he'd pay me back within the month. He didn't. But I didn't push, because it was $11,000 and he was my dad, and I thought it was a one-time thing. It wasn't a one-time thing. Over the next 2 years, the calls became a pattern. The commercial contract with the Fairview Property Management Group fell through, and they needed equipment to bid a new one. I covered the down payment on a used truck, $18,000. The insurance on the warehouse lapsed because my dad had been paying the wrong account number for 3 months, and nobody caught it. I covered the reinstatement plus the back premium, just over $9,000. Then there was the winter where 2 of the crew leads left in the same month and they had to bring in temp labor at higher rates. I covered the gap in operating costs, spread over 4 months, totaling about $22,000. I kept records of every single transfer. Date, amount, purpose, the conversation that preceded it. I kept them in a folder on my laptop, labeled H Financial, and I backed it up to 2 separate external drives. I want to be clear about something. I never lent this money expecting drama. I lent it because I believed in my dad's business, and because I was the only person in the family who had the resources to help. I also want to be clear that I am a financial analyst. I knew what I was doing. I created a simple loan agreement after the 3rd transfer. Nothing aggressive, just a document acknowledging the amounts and the informal understanding that they would be repaid when the business stabilized. My dad signed it. My mother witnessed it. I filed it. What I did not account for was the way helping quietly can make you invisible entirely. Every holiday, every family dinner, every phone call from my mother had Danielle at the center of it. Danielle had decorated her apartment beautifully. Danielle had made friends with someone interesting. Danielle was thinking about starting a wellness blog. My mother spoke about Danielle's potential, the way people speak about a stock they're convinced is about to take off with total faith and no evidence. I was the responsible one, which, in my family's language, meant I was the boring one, the one you called when something broke, not the one you celebrated. My mother said things like, "Megan, you're so lucky you have that stability in a tone that managed to make stability sound like a consolation prize." She said things like, "Danielle just connects with people in a way that's hard to explain, in a way that implied I did not and could not." Once, at Thanksgiving, when I mentioned I'd been promoted, she said, "That's wonderful, honey. and then turned immediately back to Danielle to ask about a pottery class. I stopped mentioning things after a while. I just wrote the checks. By the start of last year, the total had climbed past $140,000. The business was in better shape, new contracts, stabilized crew, better cash flow management, because I had quietly helped my dad set up a proper bookkeeping system, but repayment had never come up again. Not once. Every time I thought about raising it, I'd think about my dad's face when he was stressed, and I'd let it go. Then Danielle announced she wanted to open a boutique. Not a landscaping boutique. A clothing boutique. A curated lifestyle concept store in the Short North neighborhood of Columbus, which, if you don't know Columbus, is a charming but expensive stretch of storefronts where rent is not gentle. My mother called me before she called anyone else. I remember the exact words. "Megan, your sister has finally found her thing. We want to help her get started. Your father and I were thinking, since you're so good with money, maybe you could look at what she needs and help us figure out the family contribution." Family contribution. I wrote that phrase down. I asked what number they had in mind. My mother said they were thinking 30,000 to start, and that the family would rally around Danielle the way families do. I asked who else in the family was contributing. There was a pause. Then she said, "Well, you know how everyone is situated. You're the one who has the means, Megan, and you know how much this means to your sister." I told her I'd think about it. I want to tell you that I said no immediately. I didn't. I am embarrassed to tell you that I spent 2 weeks genuinely considering it, not because I thought it was a good idea financially, because I didn't. Boutique retail has brutal margins, but because some part of me still believed that if I helped enough, something would shift. That my mother would look at me the way she looked at Danielle. That part of me was wrong, and I knew it was wrong. And I did what I should have done 4 years earlier. I called my friend Priya, who is an attorney, and who has the kind of directness I aspire to. I told her everything, the full 43 months of it. When I finished, there was a long silence, and then she said, "Megan, you have a signed loan agreement. You have documentation of every transfer. You know that's not nothing, right?" I knew. I had just never let myself fully sit with what it meant. Priya helped me draft a formal repayment request letter, professional, not hostile, simply stating the outstanding balance with documentation attached and requesting a conversation about a repayment schedule. I sent it certified mail to my parents' home address and to the business address. I also sent it by email with read receipts. I told no one in the family. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. By Friday evening, my phone had 14 missed calls, 8 from my mother, 4 from my dad, 2 from Danielle. I let them all go to voicemail. My mother's messages started apologetic and ended somewhere near furious. My dad's were quiet and confused. Danielle's and I want you to understand, I was not surprised by this, were about the boutique. One of them said, verbatim, "I don't understand why you're doing this right now, when things are finally coming together for me." I called my dad back on Saturday morning. He picked up immediately, which told me he had been waiting. He sounded tired. He said he didn't know things had gotten to this number. I told him gently, but clearly, that the documentation was thorough, that I wasn't trying to cause harm, and that I simply needed to have an honest conversation about the money before anything else. He said my mother was very upset. I said I understood. He said maybe we could talk about it at my cousin Tyler's wedding in 2 weeks, since the whole family would be there. And here is where I made a choice that I want to tell you about, because it matters. I said yes. I did not say yes because I thought it would be pleasant. I said yes because I knew exactly what would happen if I didn't. My mother would spend those 2 weeks reframing the situation to everyone in the family. By the time any private conversation happened, the story would already be written without me. Megan overreacted. Megan blindsided us. Megan has always been difficult. I had seen this pattern my entire life. I was not going to let the story be written without me in the room. So I went to the wedding. I wore a dress I liked. I sat at the table I was assigned to, which was not the family table. I was 2 tables back, next to my dad's cousin Raymond and his wife, who I actually like quite a bit. I ate the salmon. I watched Danielle float around the reception looking luminous and receiving compliments, and I stayed quiet and I waited. My mother found her moment during the toasts. Not the official toasts after those, when people were milling around and the microphone was still live and accessible. She clinked her glass and made a small speech about family and love and sticking together. She talked about the business surviving hard years through everyone pulling together. She talked about what a gift it was to have children who showed up. She looked directly at Danielle when she said it. She did not look at me. And then she said, "Danielle, you are the heart of this family. You always have been. We are so proud of everything you're becoming." 47 people applauded. I set down my fork. My dad was looking at his hands. He knew. He has always known, I think. He just has never been able to choose differently. My mother sat back down looking satisfied. And then, because she is who she is and she cannot leave something alone, she leaned across the table and said to me, in a voice just low enough that only the people nearest to us could hear, "I hope you understand, Megan, that this family doesn't need a collections notice. We need people who actually show up." I looked at her for a moment. Then I reached down beside my chair and picked up the leather portfolio I had carried in with me that evening. I had prepared it the week before, printed on clean white paper, organized by date and category, highlighted in yellow where the amounts were largest. Bank statements with transfers circled, the loan agreement signed and witnessed. A one-page summary at the front that listed every transaction chronologically, with a final total at the bottom. $191,420. Over 43 months. To a business and a family that was currently attempting to raise $30,000 for a boutique while carrying an unacknowledged six-figure debt to the person sitting 2 tables back. I stood up. Not dramatically. I just stood. I said in a normal voice, not loud, but clear, "I'd like to respond to that." The table got quiet. The tables around us got quiet in that ripple way, that silences move through a room when something real is happening. I said, "I have showed up for this family for 43 months. I would like to show you what that looks like." I walked to my mother's table and I placed the portfolio in front of her. She looked at it without touching it. My father reached over and opened it. I watched his face as he looked at the summary page. He already knew the number. Seeing it printed and organized and official was apparently different from knowing it. Danielle said, "What is that?" My mother said, "Megan, this is not the time." I said, "You chose the time, not me." And then I said the thing I had been drafting in my head for 2 weeks, because I am a person who prepares. I have never asked for recognition. I have never asked for applause. I asked, in writing, for a conversation about repayment of documented loans, and the response was to be told, "I don't show up." So I'm showing you what showing up looks like. It looks like that portfolio, every page of it. My dad put the portfolio down on the table and pressed his hands flat on top of it and didn't say anything. My mother looked around the room and then looked back at me and said, "You're making a scene." I said, "You made a speech. I made a document." I picked up the portfolio, because it was mine, and I wanted it back. I had a copy in my car. I returned to my seat next to Raymond and his wife, who both looked studiously at their dinner plates in the way of people who have witnessed something significant and are giving you the dignity of not staring. I finished my salmon. It was actually very good. My phone buzzed twice during the rest of the reception. Both my sister. I didn't read the messages until I was in my car. The first one said, "I can't believe you did that." The second one said, "What did you expect to happen?" I thought about that second message for a long time on the drive home. What did I expect to happen? I expected exactly what happened. I expected my mother to feel what it was like to be publicly held accountable for a narrative she had constructed. I expected my father to sit with the weight of numbers he had been avoiding. I expected my sister to be confused, because Danielle has always been confused by consequences that don't involve her directly. I did not expect an apology. I have stopped expecting apologies from people who don't believe they owe one. What happened over the following weeks was quieter and more concrete. My dad called me on a Tuesday, not a frantic call, an early morning call, the kind he used to make when I was in college, and he was already 3 hours into his workday. He said he had talked to his accountant. He said the business could begin structured repayment within 60 days. He gave me a number, Not the full amount, not immediately, but a real number, a serious number, with a timeline attached. I said that worked for me. He said he was sorry. Not the way my mother apologizes, which is more of a redirect than an apology. He said, I let the wrong things become normal. I'm sorry it took this long. I told him I appreciated that. I meant it. My mother called 3 days after my dad. Her version of an apology was longer and involved several observations about my communication style. But buried in the middle of it was something real, she said. I didn't know how much it was. I think I didn't let myself know. I believe that. I think not knowing was something she actively maintained, because knowing would have required her to act differently, and acting differently would have meant giving up a story she liked. The boutique did not happen. Without my contribution, the family rally turned out to be mostly enthusiasm and very little capital. Danielle was disappointed, and then she found another idea, which is Danielle's pattern and probably always will be. The repayment began in June. It is ongoing. The loan agreement, the one my dad signed 4 years ago at the kitchen table while my mother sat 2 feet away and witnessed it with her own signature, turned out to matter quite a lot. Here is what I want you to take from this, because there is something I learned that I didn't expect to learn. I used to believe that doing the right thing in private was enough. That being the one who held things together was its own kind of integrity, regardless of who saw it or said so. And there's truth in that. I still believe your integrity is yours, whether or not it's witnessed. But I also learned that staying invisible while someone actively builds a false story is not humility, it's permission. Permission for the story to continue. Permission for the dynamic to calcify. Permission for the people who benefit from your silence to never have to reckon with what they've taken. I had documentation. I had facts. I had a signed agreement that 2 people tried to forget existed. The moment I stopped treating those things as private wounds and started treating them as exactly what they were, evidence, everything changed. Not dramatically. Not with screaming or ultimatums. With a portfolio on a table at a wedding reception, placed quietly in front of the people who needed to see it. The truth had been there the whole time. I just finally let it be visible, and that, it turned out, was the most terrifying thing I could have shown them.